The Instigators, a new film from Apple Original, will be in theaters on August 2nd. It'll be, of course, streaming on Apple Plus on August 9th. The director, who is a terrific one, Doug Liman, kind of to join us right now. Doug, it's great to see you. It's a terrific movie. Obviously, great chemistry with Matt Damon and Casey Affleck. But I want to start with a different actor. I'm sure no one started the interview today with this guy, Michael Stuhlbarg. He's one of my favorites. I love seeing him as the villain in your film, chewing the scenery. Tell me all about casting Michael.
You know, thing about Michael, I never worked with him before, but like, after I cast him and before we started shooting, he came into my office with literally 20 pages of questions about his character. Like, that's more pages than there were more questions than there were lines of dialogue for his character in the movie. And I was like, oh my God, like, I don't know if I have answers to all those questions. Like, and I'm not sure, like, I mean, and we spent like a grueling couple of hours, like going through his questions. And it's honestly one of the best experiences I've ever had with an actor. And when he showed up on set to film, he was on fire. And I was like, that is such an interesting process. And it just works.
Can you tell me some of the questions he was asking? Was it like his character's backstory, where the character came from? Like, what kind of stuff was he asking?
Yeah, I mean, it's hundreds of questions. It's all of that.
Right.
I mean, like, it's and it clearly works, because the first scene I filmed with him was the one inside the yacht club where he's planning the heist, where he drives the whole scene. He's literally talking nonstop. And we did take after take after take, and I was like, he was just brilliant. I was like, some actors like know how to get the best performance out of themselves, and some actors, you have to figure out how to coax it out of them.
Right.
Stuhlbarg's the kind of person where he's like, he knows, it's like, it's what a luxury as a filmmaker to be like, he's like, look, I know how to get my best performance out of me. Just answer all these questions, and then, other actors come to set and you have to try to figure out how to coax something out of them, and they don't know it. I mean, when Matt and I first collaborated on Born Identity, I was shooting a scene, and I had to use a very long lens because the background there was a problem with the snow, and it was when he was on the park bench in Switzerland. So it's early in the movie, and Matt gave me this look where you see something click in his eyes. And I was like, that's it. That's the character right there. And he goes, what's the character? And I was like, that right there. He's like, I don't know what I just did. Like, I was listening to, I'm like, we have to figure out what that is, because that's Jason Bourne right there. You're just going to click and go into this other violent mode. And it's whatever happened on your face. And then, like, we had to figure out, it's almost like being like a psychiatrist to figure out like how to coax that out of somebody, because they didn't even know what they did. Stuhlbarg, he's like, I know how to get it out of me. Just answer these questions, and then you won't even have to direct me.
It's fascinating. He's got, like, to me, the funniest line of the movie, when Matt's character keeps emphasizing the specific amount of money that he needs.
Yeah.
And Spielberg's response is, hey, I need a 15-inch cock. Yeah. I asked God. He said, maybe next time.
And by the way, we had he did 7 different versions of that, 7 different, he ad-libbed on that one. He went off script in a bunch of different ways. And
right. It's amazing to watch him, man. He's such a great actor. I love the supporting cast as well. Ving Rhames is fantastic. Alfred Molina, Toby Jones. These guys are really good character actors showing up and having a blast. I want to ask you specifically about Ron Perlman. Is this the scariest politician you've ever seen in your life? Because I can't think of a more menacing one than Ron Perlman as Boston's mayor.
Yeah, no, I mean, first of all, like, there's the sort of the kismet of casting Ron Perlman. I was, because I did Roadhouse and Instigators back to back, and I was shooting on the last day of Roadhouse in Las Vegas at a UFC fight, at a real UFC fight. And Ron Perlman was backstage at the fight, right, because he has a relationship with UFC. And so I met him, and he said, how come you never cast me in any movies? You've never offered me a part. And I'm looking at him, and I'm like, you're going to regret asking me that because I actually am about to offer you a part like right now. And he's like, well, I thought this was the last day of shooting on Roadhouse. I go, it is. But in 4 weeks, I started shooting Instigators. And I think I got an amazing part for you. And, like it's because, I went to school in Rhode Island and there was a sort of a corrupt mayor in Rhode Island named Buddy Cianci who went to jail and then got reelected out of jail.
Yeah.
And that character always stuck with me. And and Boston and Providence are right next to each other. And I was like, I kind of wanted to bring some of that energy to the mayor. And
Yeah.
Ron was, as I'm saying, like if you ask me one thing I'm more proud of in Instigators than anything else, it's the supporting cast and just how we took every role and did something special with it. And that's because I got people like Ron Perlman to come in.
Yeah, without question. Like I'm watching Toby Jones, and like maybe in his filmography, it's a relatively small role, but like this guy's played Capote. Like he's a terrific actor. Like Melina obviously has been a great stage actor, screen actor, etc. So to your point, there's no wasted roles. Everyone's got
and I don't make
meaning.
I don't make political movies per se. Like I don't put my own politics into the movies. They may deal with politics, like Fair Game and or Born Identity deals with politics, but but I'm not like forcing my political views down people's throats. I understand I understand how to stay in my lane. That like people want to be entertained by me. Doesn't mean that the real world doesn't seep into my film, and that Ron Perlman playing a mayor who has lost re-election but refuses to concede has some there's some similarities to real world events. But I'm milking it for comedy.
Yes. 100%. We'll get to Roadhouse action a little bit. I just actually finally just watched it. I really enjoyed it. I thought you did an excellent job with it after watching the original again. But I want to mention specifically your gift, Doug, with action sequences and like the car chase in this movie is fantastic. And to me, I'm like, any car chase is so challenging because in my head, I'm like, how could you top, Billy Friedkin and the French Connection? But how are you able to make such a great, authentic, entertaining car chase in Boston?
It really helps when you have Boston's favorite sons. I mean, it sounds like just a line, but seriously, like, if you want to do a great car chase, you need access. You need streets to be closed. What you're doing is very dangerous. You need the public cleared away, and you got to approach the governor of Massachusetts. You have to approach the mayor of Boston. And usually they say no because it wreaks havoc on a city to do the kinds of closures that we had to do on Instigators. But when it's the Afflecks and Matt Damon making the request, it wasn't like we got carte blanche, but we got enough access that we were able to do the car chase for real. And really the exciting thing for me for the car chase was because you're right to cite Billy Friedkin, and that was influenced me on Born Identity, and I was like, the Born Identity car chases are so I feel like it's like you shouldn't go back there. Like it's like winning in a casino. Like take your winnings and leave.
Yeah.
But I decided an Instigators to go back there with Matt, even though I know we'll you're going to get compared to Born Identity, and it's like so that's the reason not to do it. But the reason to do it is I thought, the really fun challenge for me in Instigators is to create a dialogue scene inside the car that's more entertaining than the car chase. And I thought we had the elements to do that because it's such a fun dynamic when you have a driver who's suicidal and Casey Affleck's just learning that, and he's not driving, and Matt Damon is driving, and Casey, rightfully so, doesn't want Matt to drive if he's that's just not the quality you want in a driver in a high-speed chase. And they have their therapist in the car at Hong Chow, and she's trying to get Matt to slow down and stop, as any good therapist would. And if you're Casey, that's the last thing in the world you want the therapist to do. And there was so much fun dynamics to sort of mine and comedy to mine in that car. And I was like, can I do that while the car chase is happening? So that there's like really fun really fun character scene inside the car, and if you look out the window, there's crazy shit happening outside the window.
I think you're able to do it. It's a wonderful scene, a really great set piece. And I love your choice of music in the movie. That sequence is set to Petula Clark's Downtown.
Yeah.
Later on, you use House of Pain's Jump Around.
Yeah.
How did you decide on those two very inspired musical choices?
Well, I have a really brilliant editor in Sar Klein who has a great musical taste. And Downtown was always in the script, just because it was such a funny idea that was really played for comedy.
Yeah.
But I've really been lucky in my career to have editors who have strong musical senses and work with me to sort of find exactly the right sound.
Talking right now with Doug Liman. Of course, The Instigators is the film which will be in theaters on August 2nd, on Apple Plus August 9th, an Apple original film. I'm curious, did Ben Affleck have any involvement? Of course, he's Matt's producing partner and it's Casey's brother. Was he involved at all, or was it just Matt Damon and Casey Affleck in this instance and not Ben?
No, Ben worked on the script, and he's very much running Artist Equity. So like,
right.
If there was a studio, it was Ben.
Yeah. And what was it primarily script? Did he offer any directorial choices, or mainly just the script?
Yeah, I mean, he helped me on editing and, but he's producerial.
Right. In terms of the acting styles of Matt and Casey, again, you've worked with Matt previously in The Bourne Identity, have a good relationship with him. How would you describe work with Matt versus Casey?
Matt's a little bit more the adult in the room. And that's like, that sounds like I'm saying one's better than the other, when the reality is I probably prefer the adolescent in the room. It's a little bit more wild, a little more unexpected, a little bit, so I came away from Instigators just in love with Casey Affleck, like in love with working with him, in love with what combing through the dailies and all of the choices he gave me, just the performance he put on screen. I just think, and I saw the movie last night with the audience for the first time, and I saw how Casey won over the whole audience, and that it's like, he's, it's, I love that, Casey's never really been the leading man in a big commercial movie like this, and Matt's never been in a comedy like this, and it's like, I love putting actors in movies they've never done before. I mean, or kinds of roles they've never done before. I mean, right? I mean, when I cast Matt in Bourne Identity, it was like he was a very unexpected choice. He's the last person in the world someone might have thought of back then to be in an action movie. He'd just done Good Will Hunting and Talented Mr. Ripley. Those are not like roles you would never think of. You would think of for that, but I love showcasing actors in ways you have never seen them before, and it helps when you have superstars like Casey Affleck and Matt Damon, because they have a lot to offer.
No question about it. And it makes you think about, with comedies and works with acting stars, it makes me think of one of my favorite movies, which is Swingers, which it's amazing to think about. 1996, we're almost coming up on the 30th anniversary.
Yeah.
And for me, Doug, I'm like, it's not only one of the best movies of the 90s, it's one of the best comedies of the last 30 years. It's one of the most important independent films ever. And like, I think it's just brilliant upon brilliant. And it's probably the most rewatchable film, I think, of your filmography, which is saying something, because as you said, you did The Bourne Identity, you've done movies with Tom Cruise, Edge of Tomorrow, but I just adore Swingers. So any input you can tell me about the making of that movie, what it was like working with John and Vince?
It's one of the things I learned about myself and really about filmmaking, is that I shared the script to Swingers with my roommate at the time, who was like, I don't think you should make this film. The Vince Vaughn character is saying disparaging things about women. It's like, he's not likable. And I'm like, well, I love that character. And they're like, no one's going to like that character. No one's going to like the movie, and because they're going to hate that character. I was like, well, I like that character. And I made the movie, and obviously people loved Vince Vaughn in the movie. Spielberg saw the movie because I showed it to, I couldn't get the rights to use the Jaws music. even though other people had used it, at whatever point I was doing Swingers, Universal that owned Jaws said, Spielberg is sick of people imitating Jaws. You can't have the music. And I knew someone who knew someone who knew someone who knew Spielberg. And I was like, I got the film to him and said, could I please have permission to use the Jaws music? And Spielberg did two things. He said yes. And the second thing he did was he cast Vince Vaughn in Jurassic Park 2.
Yeah,
right then and there, just from seeing like a rough cut of Swingers.
Yeah.
And then, but what I discovered is that like I should make movies that where if someone else made it, it would be different. That I'm bringing, like part of what I'm bringing, like obviously if my roommate had made Swingers, it would have been a negative portrayal of Vince Vaughn's character because she didn't like him on the page, whereas I loved him. And I was like, that's a reason for me to make that movie because I love that character that other people might not love. And so when I look at a script, when I look at Instigators, I'm like, everything I've led in my life is bringing me to a vision of how to make this movie that would be different than if some other filmmaker made it. Yeah. And that started with Swingers. I didn't realize it until after Swingers.
Well, and a great compliment I could pay you is that Sideways, which is another film that I love, I finally convinced my friends to watch it. And he goes, I'm getting real Swingers vibes from it. And I started laughing. He goes, that Giamatti character in Thomas Hayden Church, it reminds me a lot of Mikey and Trent. And I said, so all roads go back to Swingers.
Yeah.
It's funny how it works. Just a thought on Roadhouse, because I loved it, man. And I hadn't seen the original in a long time. So what I did was I rewatched the original, then I watched your version, and I liked your version better. And I thought it was updated and smarter and funnier and more ludicrous and more outrageous. But I love the locale. I love where you shot it. And Gyllenhaal is great. He's just unbelievably jacked up. And my favorite bit I wanted to ask you specifically about is the routine where the first time he's going to kick these guys' asses. And he says, hey, is there a hospital nearby?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, there's 125. Yeah. Where did that idea stem from? Because I think that's such a funny conceit. And then you call it back later in the movie when he's about to beat the guy. Because, hey, just so you know, good news is I'm going to break this finger, but the hospital's 20 minutes away. Where did that come from? I think that specific idea was so funny.
That scene is why I chose to do the movie. That was in the script I was given. There were tons. The rest of the script didn't work. Conor McGregor's character didn't exist. It was about turtles. I mean, it was like it. But when you're like, where's that moment where you decide to make a movie? And in the case of Roadhouse, that one scene existed almost verbatim how you saw it in when you saw it. Yeah. And I thought, okay, I've never seen a character that, it's sort of trash talky to ask is there a hospital nearby? But that's a setup for Jake's character to then drive them to the hospital after he beats them up. Right. And I was like, I've never seen a character like that. So I was like locked into the journey. I was like, the rest of this, because you're like, if you looked at the script that I had at the time, you'd be like, well, that in almost no way resembles the final movie you made. Where was the decision to make the movie? Like, what did you sign on to? And I'm like, I signed on to that character because of that scene. And so, like, and in Instigators, there's like, it really was, the car chase and being like, the idea that Matt Damon's on the run with his therapist. And I'm like, I want to tell that story. There's tons of stuff we reworked around the whole movie. It's the third act of Instigators and the script they handed me took place underneath the bakery and it was too small. And I was like, tons of shit changed. But the core DNA of the movie of Matt and Casey on the run with Matt's therapist, that was like my North Star.
It's amazing. We all have different reasons for making movies or loving movies. I love the fact that you were able to give that insight and people recognize that. The Instigators, once again, is in theaters August 2nd. It's available on Apple Plus August 9th. One last thought as I thank you. One of my favorite parts of Swingers, of course, is when they're playing video games. It says, I'm going to make Gretzky's head bleed. Yeah. So I was laughing in The Instigators, seeing a hockey scene and Matt's monologue about Bobby Orr and like seeing his son. Yeah. I love that you're able to weave in hockey, which is a very Bostonian thing.
Yeah,
Doug Liman, terrific director.
I'm an aspiring hockey player. I'm really not very good, but I love playing ice hockey. And it started, by the way, playing video game ice hockey. And from that I was like, this is so fun playing on a video game. I'm going to go buy the gear and just start playing for real.
I love that the game inspired you. Doug Liman, terrific director and a hockey fan as well. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks.
Appreciate you.
Bye-bye.